appreciate that. So I'm going to stand over here. I kind of jacked up my knee somehow, and I'm not getting around so great, so I apologize. Usually I move around a little bit, but I'm going to be pretty stationary here. So, you guys like my catchy title? Fraudsters, Addicts, and Squatters. Oh my. I should have just changed it to my experience with crackheads, but we'll get to that. So, Tim, if you could change the slide for me. So, just quick here, because I know you guys want to get to Axel's presentation, so I'm going to zip through this. I'm going to talk about a little bit about myself, property. We're going to look at some pictures. That's everyone's favorite part, right? Go through the numbers, what went wrong, which is a lot. I'm going to talk about squirrel doors. It's not really squirrel doors, but we'll see. What I learned, and then how you can reach me. So my name is Colin Schleifer. I've got a background in investment management and finance, probably about the last, 20 to 25 years. I'm a relatively new investor. I've only been doing this since 2021. The reason I got into this was before everyone was crazy about AI and data segmentation and all this stuff, I recognized for my industry, there's a very strong chance that half the people that do what I do aren't going to have jobs in about 10 years. I really do think there's going to be a lot of attrition there. So during the pandemic, I was sitting down trying to think about how can I make money while I continue my career so that when my kids are in college in about 10 years, they can afford it, right? And so I kept landing on real estate, and I spent, like a lot of you, probably about 6 months going to YouTube University. But during the pandemic, there was no meetups happening, so no real networking for myself, which significantly, I would say, curtailed my learning curve. And so that's why I love meetings like this, and I love meeting with you guys. And it's why I joined the board, because I've gotten a lot out of these type of meetings, whether it's REIA or other meetings. You just learn so much from the people in this room. So for those of you that are new, I really hope and implore you to talk to as many people as you can and learn as much as you can and pick it up, because these meetings will significantly accelerate your learning curve. So my portfolio is fairly modest compared to a lot of the folks in this room. I've got 2 triplexes in Nashua, 1 in Manchester, which I'm going to talk about, and I just closed on a quad in Raymond, New Hampshire. And so my goal is to try to match my W-2 income within the next 10 years. And, knock on wood here. Yeah. Hopefully I can get there. So, Tim, you mind? So the property, so it's 219 Calef Road, Manchester. Like most of these buildings, about 100 years old, a little more. 3-unit. When I bought the building, it says 7-bed here, but when I bought it, it had 5 beds, 3 baths. One of the things that I've learned in the short time I've been doing this is I always try to find buildings where I can add bedroom count. So I look for mismatches between the square footage and the bedroom, the existing bedrooms, etc. And by and large, you can find those. And this is not this building, but I'll share this little tidbit that I recently picked up. The building I bought in Raymond, almost every investor out there ignored it because it was all 1-bed units. But the square footage was big, so I went and I realized there's huge expansion potential through this attic space that at one point had been framed out for bedrooms. So I'm going to be turning a 1-bed, 1-bath into a 4-bed, 2-bath. And that 1 unit is going to more than pay for the entire thing, and the rest is just gravy. So that's the kind of mismatch you want to look for. And I got it for asking because nobody paid attention to it. So that's the kind of stuff I've learned at meetings like this. So Tim, if you can keep going. So everyone's favorite, some pictures here. I just want to point some stuff out because I'm not sure how well you can see these pictures. On the floor here, you can't see it, but there's full of, forgive the language, but cat shit, dog shit, I think human child poop also, all over the floor. And this doesn't look that bad, but trust me, these units were not in great shape. The floors were almost not salvageable, all horsehair plaster. They looked like Swiss cheese. You can see this lovely light fixture that's got a huge chunk, looks like someone bit a chunk out of it. I'm not sure how that happened. Tim, you want to go to the next one? So, more of the same. This is not what I would call atypical for a lot of these buildings. But it really needed not just a cosmetic overhaul, but it needed new flooring, new windows, fresh paint. I lead-proofed everything in here because there was holes everywhere. And I figured if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it right. And so I got the lead-safe shirts for all these units. We put in granite countertops, some cases new cabinets, new light fixtures. I mean, we did a lot here for this building. Tim, keep going. So you can see, here, I'm just going to move over here. You can see this was the best looking unit, right? And it wasn't terrible. I could have probably kept that, but I wanted it to be uniform, so I got rid of this. This was the top floor unit, mostly cosmetic. This was by far the best of the units. And so we just spruced it up. Can you go to the next one? You can see, this is what a lot of the walls look like. You can see right into the wall, just Swiss cheese everywhere. The floors, that's some combination of droppings all over the floor. I'm not even going to speculate. Tim, keep going. So this is what the units ended up looking like when we were done. So we were able to take those floors, make them nice and shiny again, a place where I think people can be proud to live. We reglazed all the tubs, put new surrounds in, new vanities, new LVP flooring in some of the units, stainless steel appliances, painted everything, white to brighten it up. I was pretty happy with how this turned out, but it was not a smooth road to get there by any means. So Tim, can you? I went through some of this. This is just the scope of a lot of the stuff that we did. If anyone wants this presentation, they want to look at it or ask me about any of it, I'm happy to talk about it, but I did talk about it already, so we'll just skip this one. And so here's the numbers at purchase, right? So I purchased this building, I forgot to say this, at $440, and these were the rents when I got them. So $4,025, that's actually not bad, but then I had unit 3 immediately vacate, so that was not helpful. One of the things that I did when I negotiated this building, which I did buy off market, was I asked the seller, and I honestly can't believe he did this, I asked him if he would send a letter raising the rents before I closed, because these were not the rents when I was negotiating. The rents were more like $3,000. And I wanted to make sure I was in a position where at least I was going to break even while I was renovating, or as close to as possible break even. And so he actually did it, even though we hadn't closed. He went out on a limb and did it, so that helped me out quite a bit. The day we closed, the rents were a little bit higher, but they were still under market. You keep going. So this is what we were able to increase the rents by once we stabilized. So we added $19.25 in additional rental value. And go ahead, Tim. And so this is where we ended up. So we went from $40.25. Actually, I think that math is incorrect. I forgot to change that one. This should say $250, so that's not right. But $60.25 is where we're at. So we significantly increased upon stabilization. You can see where the rents are now. I turned those 2-bed apartments in unit 1 and unit 2 into 3 beds, and it was as simple as just putting up a door. There was a living room and then another living room attached to it with an archway. I put up a door and immediately added value. That's the kind of stuff you live for when you find these buildings that have that. So keep going, Tim. Just diving into the numbers a little bit. You can see the mortgage payment, the debt service, all of the bills. So at the end of this, I have a 25% cash-on-cash return on the building, and hopefully that'll grow in time. And so it ended great, but it really took a lot to get there. And so maybe we'll talk about some of the things that didn't go so well, right? So we'll start with contractors. Don't hire crackheads.
Really?
Lesson done. Okay, so I had a contractor whose entire crew was probably not cracks, probably more like heroin, but one of them actually overdosed and died during the job, not in my unit, thank God. But one day I came over and I was like, hey, where's so-and-so? He's like, oh, he died. Like, they just kept working and they were like, yeah, like, no big deal. Okay, so these guys, every day it was just a haggle. There was always some new thing. Every day is a negotiation. This is lessons learned where it's not a healthy way to have a relationship with a contractor. So if you're stressed out every day working with your contractor, fire them. That's the lesson learned from this one. It's not worth it. Another thing, floors. I ended up with another contractor who was great, but what I realized is he doesn't know shit about floors. And those floors, as you can see, were really effed up. And so he tried a couple times and it just did not work. I eventually ended up having to hire a specialist for that. And so if you're gonna refinish hardwoods, unless you have a really talented GC who's got experience with flooring, I highly recommend you hire a specialist to do that. It's a lesson learned for me. All the tenants I inherited were hoarders, every single one. So lots of dumpsters, lots of disgusting stuff. Not as bad as you guys, some of you guys may remember Dee's cat shit house or whatever the hell he called it. Not as bad as that, but pretty bad. Lead, first floor unit had a ton of it. That cost a lot. Lead remediation and that, hiring an RRP certified contractor to do that. It's not, there's not that many of them around, so that was fairly expensive. And then, property management. I've got a great property manager now. When I started, I had a horrible property manager, and I can tell you that I had all of these things. Opportunity loss. I got myself in some really dangerous situations, even though I wasn't the manager. The revenue was never there, and I was always stressed out. And so that led to, Tim, if you can, the squirrel. You may ask yourself, why is there a squirrel on the screen? I'm not actually going to talk about squirrels, but I'll get to the squirrel in a minute. So the bad property management led to a tenant being placed in the upper floor unit, one bed. It's a Section 8 tenant. And that particular tenant, I trusted the property manager to do their job. And then after the fact, I found out who they were. One day on a lark, I decided to do a Google search. Google showed me that this particular tenant had just been released from prison after an 8-year bid for kidnapping 2 children. Also, heroin distribution, fentanyl, you name it. Guy's been in jail the better part of the last 15 years. I Googled this, so I had to ask, why didn't your property management software or you pick this up on the background check? I'm not going to speculate if the background check ever happened, but it didn't. Okay, so I was not happy about that, and as you can imagine, it turned out exactly the way you thought it would. Turns out there was a water leak. One day I go over there, I meet the property manager, and we're knocking on the door. No one's picking up, or no one's answering the door. And eventually we enter the unit to find literally 2 drugged out, heroin addicts just sitting there. Nope. There we go. 2 addicts just sitting there, sort of slumped in the corner, neither of which are my renter. And so what we discovered is that these 2 people were living there for several months. My renter rented it to them, pieced out, had been collecting the money from them while Section 8 paid me. So not only is this person a kidnapping crack addict, but also defrauding the state. So, and then here's where the plot really thickens with this, and I'm getting to the squirrel, I promise. So, the night before we entered the property, it turns out my actual tenant was driving on the highway, high on heroin, fell asleep at the wheel and crashed his car. He was in Valley Street Jail, and he's now in prison for an additional 5 years because he was on parole. And but I was stuck with these 2 crack addicts or whatever heroin addicts in my unit, so we called Manchester PD. And you can imagine how useless that was. They would not physically remove them, even though I had a lease. These people didn't have identification, et cetera, et cetera. Manchester PD basically said you have to evict them. And I said, well, how do I evict people that don't actually live here, who aren't on a lease, who I don't know and don't have driver's license for? And their advice to me was hire an attorney. So I was like, great. As they're leaving, I asked, what are their rights? And they walked me through. And I said, so I can change the locks in this building, right? They said, yeah, they don't technically officially live here. You can change the locks. So I said, great. And here's where the squirrel door thing comes in. Hired my maintenance manager to come over the next day. And I had to put door closes, automatic door hinge closes on all of the outer doors of the building. And I had them set the keypad entry locks to auto lock. So when these people left, they couldn't get back in, just like a squirrel trying to get into your attic. So I turned my entire building into a giant squirrel house, squirrel door. And I'm sure anyone who's works in pest control can appreciate that. So they couldn't get back in, and who are they going to go to? They're not going to come to me to get back in. So we waited a couple days. We never heard from them again. Put an abandonment notice up. You know, the rest is history. We were able to re-rent it pretty quickly because there actually wasn't any damage, if you believe it, which is a freaking miracle. So the lesson there is creative problem solving is your friend, as long as you're doing it sort of within the lines as much as you can. So Tim, go to the next slide. So what I learned, I went through some of this, so always look for opportunities to add bedrooms, look for large square footage in houses and small bedroom counts, because more often than not, there is a way for you to squeeze more value out of that building. And especially, don't discount one bed units in a building if it's got big square footage, because you can find a gem that others are going to skip if you're willing to put in the effort to renovate. Property management, if you're gonna have a property manager, you gotta have a good one and the right one, because if you don't, your life is gonna be a living hell. And if any of you are experiencing that right now and you wanna sell me your buildings, my contact information will be on here at the end. So, creative problem solving. It's a skill that cannot be overstated. Contractors will either save your sanity and make you money, or they will absolutely destroy your mental state. So my advice there is don't hang on to a bad one any longer than you have to. And if your gut is telling you that they're messing with you, it's probably right on. Networking. I didn't have the benefit of this when I first started doing this, and it has accelerated my learning curve and what I know about investing in multifamily real estate just exponentially. It cannot be stated enough. Coming to these meetings, meeting people, you know, get out of your comfort zone, introduce yourself, hear their story. It's just so important to how you advance as an investor. You have to have a thick skin here to do this. Things are always going to go wrong. There's no if, it's always when. And I mean, right now, for the buildings, I have a furnace that broke. I've got a bathroom I just had to gut because of a leak. I've got another one with mold growing in it or mildew. All this is happening at the same time I'm renovating a brand new building. You have to be able to weather that kind of stuff and sort of have it roll off your back, or you're going to drive yourself crazy. And then finally, just you got to remember that emotion can run high in these situations, because sometimes people get attached to their homes and you might have to remove them from there. But you have to remember you're running a business, and their problems should not and cannot become your problems. So keep them at arm's length as much as you can. So with that, I think I have got my contact information up here. And I just want to say one other thing. I do have a fairly big renovation project starting in a building in Raymond in March. And I am looking for any of you that have worked with any contractors up there that you've had good experiences with. I have a contractor, but I'm not sure I want to use them for a renovation of this scale. So I'm looking for new blood. So if you guys have any, please come and find me and let me know. And with that, if we have time, do we have time for questions? Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, fire away. Oh God, I gotta pick people. All right, you're the closest.
You said you bought it, you paid $400, you put 80 into it. What do you think it would appraise for now, if you were to guess?
I'm gonna guess mid to high sixes, maybe something like that.
Yeah,
That's just a guess. I could be wrong on that. Total guess. But somebody, I saw a hand. Oh.
You mentioned the lead remediation was not very fun. Did you oversee that yourself, or did you go through the city of Manchester's lead program?
No. After talking to my good friend Josh, who's sitting here somewhere, I think, I will never ever use that program. What I did is I went to the website, I found their list of certified lead remediators, and I interviewed a couple of them on the phone and ended up choosing one that I wanted to work with. It's more expensive, absolutely. It's a process. You have to have multiple tests done. You have to test the outside and the ground. You got to test the hallways. You know, there's a lot of ways you can fail, so it can be very frustrating. And I did have to redo a couple things. Like I had to make the basement floor lead safe because they found lead in the basement. That was an added cost I didn't factor in. So, but you know, It's worth it. People appreciate the fact that it's lead safe certified.
Any specific reason why you wouldn't use their program through the city? Or we can talk after.
Yeah, I mean, basically just stuff that I've heard from friends of mine that have used it and had a very, very bad experience. That's Josh, everybody.
Later.
Maybe let's just
Later.
wait. Let's wait on that one.
Later.
He's the guy you want to talk to about that, though.
Yeah, later.
What would it cost you? For the lead?
The lead?
Yeah.
Gosh, let me think. I think that part of it, this doesn't include the testing. I think just the contracting work was $8,000.
But how much?
It wasn't.
How much was that? I mean, how extensive? I mean, you.
It wasn't that, so it was mostly just hanging some extra drywall.
Oh,
That was the majority of it. So, I wasn't going to fully dig out all the horsehair and the plaster and all that. That would have been a nightmare. So we covered it and then we encapsulated it and we'll just have to retest it, every year or so.
It looked like the floors were hardwoods in the pictures, and it was cat pee and dog pee, so it must have smelled pretty bad. So how did you guys handle that?
Clothespins? Yeah, it did smell really bad in there.
So did you get them sanded down and then bin them and or what? How did you?
Well, yeah, so they did. They had to sand them down. I mean, frankly, this was probably the last time you could ever do that with these floors because they've clearly been sanded before and they was almost to the nails, so I think if these floors get screwed up again, I'm probably just gonna have to reinstall or cover them with LVB at that point.
So sanding and then it was urethanes?
Yeah, so
That sufficed, yeah.
yeah. It did take them several attempts to make the floors look that way. So it was a little more expensive than I would say is typical. Anybody else? Oh, yep.
How long did it take you to stabilize the rents?
Let's see. So this was my third building, so I had even though I had this bad experience with this contractor, I felt a little bit more confident this time, so I was able to keep things moving. I want to say the entire thing took me about 5 months, which is that's much faster than I anticipated, because my first two buildings, it took me 18 months. So, I figured things out a little bit, and it went faster. Any other questions? All right, well, I'm gonna be here for the meeting. Like Tim said, I'm also on the board, so I'd love to meet all of you guys. If any of you that I don't know, please come introduce yourselves, especially if you have a contractor in Raymond. But, I'm always happy to talk to anybody. So thank you, appreciate it.